Now it is time to introduce our very special guest. He's an expert on all things Raiders, but this Barstow native also knows UNLV basketball. I'm, of course, talking about the great Paul Gutierrez, Raiders beat reporter for ESPN. Paul, how are you? And are the Raiders letting you enjoy this March Madness season?
Well, I mean, UNLV is not in it, so I mean, I really haven't enjoyed March Madness since probably 1990, anyways. They did have that Sweet 16 run a couple of years back, but no, man, the Raiders and the NFL, there's no such thing as an NFL offseason anymore, guys. You know that. And number one, thanks for having me on here. It's I've been watching what you guys have been doing from afar, and really proud of you guys. And I hate to say that because that makes it sound like I'm on some kind of mountaintop like Yoda or something looking down, but no, man, it's good to see what you guys are doing and representing and keeping things real and keeping things for yourselves. That's really refreshing and heartening to see that kind of thing happen. But to answer your question, no, because I can't enjoy it. UNLV's not in it. The Raiders are too crazy. There's too much things going on. It never ends, right? It's all
Well, Paul, we're glad to have you on. You're definitely the OG reporter, and we really respect your work. But you mentioned Yoda. I caught your little reference yesterday with Baby Yoda, Grogu, throwing up on the GIF on Twitter. And people were asking in the comments, what are you talking about? And I think it's because Duke won. Am I correct?
Yeah. I like to just throw things out there, and it's obvious if it has it has absolutely positively nothing to do. Here's the thing: I literally was running on the treadmill at the gym watching that game, and as soon as the final whistle, I had it ready to go, and I just hit send. So there was no context, there was nothing. But anybody that was watching the timeline and watching the game would have understood exactly where it was coming from. Again, being a UNLV alum, and I make these comparisons all the time to Raider fans and UNLV fans. The Tuck Rule game to Raider Nation is the same as Greg Anthony fouling out against Duke in the 91 Final Four is to Gucci Rowe and UNLV fans. It was the beginning of a dynasty for Duke and the Patriots. It was the beginning of the end for a dynasty with UNLV and the beginning of the end for the Raiders, who seems like they're starting to come out of it a little bit now, 20 years later. But it's there's so many connections there. So when I do things like that, it's usually UNLV related with my alma mater or Barstow, my hometown, born and raised where my mom and dad and my brother still are. So yeah, it's not real hard to figure it out. And there was a meaning to it too, because it was blue that Grogu was throwing up. So it kind of made sense.
Well, Paul, I'm glad I got that resolved, because people are really confused about that. But Paul, we really know you. You obviously from being an expert at the Raiders, covering that, but I feel like when I talk to people about you, there's always something new I'm learning. But then I learned something new about you just a few minutes ago. So I was going to ask you about the big trade, but I'm gonna wait for that because of the cool hat you're wearing, Barstow. You mentioned that you also played the trumpet, and you're going to UNLV on a scholarship for band. Is that correct?
Yeah, back in the day, man. Like I said, I know I'm just a little bit older than you. I just turned 52 last week, and I could finally grow some facial hair. So I'm going to do that as long as I can until it
Happy
turns
belated.
white. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and I mean, there was some constants in my life growing up in Barstow. Number one was family, obviously, right? My dad, I grew up with my dad teaching martial arts, and he's still teaching to this day. He'll be 73 this summer, and he's still running the karate school in Barstow. So I grew up with that. I wrestled all 4 years in high school. I played football when I was a senior. I played baseball at Barstow College as well as in high school. And the other thing that was always a constant was band. Trumpet was kind of my vehicle at the time. So by the time I was a junior and a senior, I was the lead trumpet player playing solos for our field shows. And in Barstow, it's a small town. It's 20,000 people. Very, very diverse. A lot of a pretty big Latino population, Mexican American, and basically, if you keep digging there, that everybody in Barstow has a primo that's from Belen, New Mexico. So Belen and Barstow are like sister cities for some reason. A lot of people went over there. My grandparents came over to work at the Marine base after World War II. So there's all these connections there, but the constant was band for me. And yeah, I was good enough to be nominated for the McDonald's All-American band when I was a senior. Didn't really try out for it or make it, but it was good to do it. It allowed us, talking about a small town like Barstow, to go and travel. We were gone nonstop at competitions, whether they were in Las Vegas, LA, San Bernardino, Rialto. We played halftime show for a Los Angeles Lasers game at the LA Forum. which would get our friend Beto Duran very excited about the LA Lasers back in the day. And we also, this is before the Rams even moved to St. Louis. We did a pregame show at Anaheim Stadium, and I still got the VHS tape. I don't know if you guys know what VHS is, but my VCR still works. So I'll pop that bad boy in every now and again. So throughout all of that, I actually had a scholarship offer to go play my trumpet at UNLV straight out of high school. I didn't do it. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I liked band. I didn't love it enough to know that, hey, if I go on this band scholarship, I'm just going to kind of do it and major in music. And I had a job waiting for me playing my trumpet in some like lounge lizard band at 18 years old. But I stayed home, figured out I wanted to do journalism. I took a journalism class at Barstow Community College. I played baseball there. And that journalism class, I was the only student for a semester. It was myself and Dr. Richard Reeve, the most right-wing conservative male in Barstow you could ever imagine. And he actually set me on my path because he's the one that introduced me to the California Chicano News Media Association and the scholarships that came from that. And that led to the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and the Freedom Forum and Sports Journalism Institute and everything that kind of came from there. So, there's all these paths that you come to these forks in the road and you look at them and go, okay, well, which way am I going to go? And you just take the one that feels right. And for me at that point, I don't regret anything, but I do kind of wonder, what would have happened if I had just gone to UNLV on my band scholarship and played my trumpet? Well, I probably wouldn't be talking to you good gentlemen right now, but and that's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a thing, right? So we just kind of figure it out. And long answer to your short question, but yeah, I played trumpet in high school.
you probably could have been in episode 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars, doing the trumpet for Duel of Fates or one of those songs. So that would have been pretty cool. But what like, I have to ask real quick, what was it like being the only journalism student in it? Like, you're supposed, obviously, like, like you come in, there's a class clown, there's a this or there's that. You literally had to do all the roles.
I was all of them.
It was just you by yourself.
It was, well, again, it's like growing up in a town like Barstow, right? Everybody says, well, what did you do there? You're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm also halfway to everywhere. I'm 2 hours to Vegas. I'm 2 hours to LA. I'm an hour to Big Bear. I'm an hour and a half to Palm Springs. And being the only student in a journalism class, I learned a little bit of everything from how to write a decent lead to how to write a kicker to how to edit, how to print it out. This is back when we would print it out on wax paper and we'd have to physically lay it out and get the wax roller and roll out the newspaper. Now, we only did this once every 2 weeks and it was a 4-page newspaper. But I mean, the thing that sticks in my mind the most is I'm doing this in the first ever presidential election I could vote in, Michael Dukakis versus George Bush. That's how long ago this was, guys. And we put out a newspaper the day, on election day of 1988. So it was weird being the only student in there, but it was also so fulfilling because you got to learn and do so many things, which led to my correspondent job at the Barstow Desert Dispatch, which again was a small town newspaper for 20,000 people in Barstow. But if I'm not, putting together a school newspaper at Barstow College, and I'm not covering Barstow Little League on one day, guess what? I was going to LA Raider games. I was going to LA Ram games. I was going to Dodgers, Angels, LA Kings. Lakers came much later, but it gave me, again, just all those different experiences of being the only one. And it was a little bit later when kind of the lights turned on. It was like, well, not only am I the only one journalism student, but the diversity that I brought as well, being Latino, being a Chicano, young Chicano male at the time. You guys call me the OG. I don't know if that's kind of a nice term for viejo either. So, I'll take it.
Nah.
But for now, I don't know about you, but Paul made me feel like I haven't done enough with my life. So
I was thinking
like,
the exact same.
I'm not an all-American trumpet player, but
I was thinking,
I didn't know that was a thing.
I'm like, if I'm not doing this, what would be my other talent? And I'm starting to think. I'm like, I don't know what it would. Maybe comedian. I don't know. I don't know what else I would have done.
But Paul, let's shift over real quick because we could talk to you all day about getting to know you, Barstow, the way you kind of were raised. But real quick, the big trade, as you know, Davante Adams from the Packers to the Raiders. Can we kind of get the behind the scenes look? You told us that you were watching the Duke game on a treadmill. Where were you when the trade went down? And are you a little surprised about it, or not really, because of the friendship between Derek Carr and Davante Adams?
Yes and no to all of those things. I mean, it's funny because it's not surprising that it came down because of their relationship and because Davante Adams bought a house in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and that was all out there. But it was surprising in that the Packers tagged him and that Aaron Rodgers just signed the massive deal. So you look at those, you try and put these things together, and you're like, okay, well, he's not going to do that unless he knows he's going to have his top target back, right? But then you look at the Raiders, and it's like there's no tampering going on, right? No tampering at all. Just two friendly guys. They're college besties from Fresno State back in the day. But it all makes sense when you look at it. And to me, there's a big piece here that's missing, guys, from what national media is saying. Yes, he did choose, quote unquote, less money from the Raiders. Yes, he did choose Derek Carr over Aaron Rodgers, a Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl champion, an MVP. But Nevada doesn't have any state taxes either. So that's a huge piece here that Davante Adams doesn't have to pay any taxes on his money once he establishes that residency. And what did he do? Oh, yeah, like I just mentioned, he's got a house there too. So I'm not saying that anything's fake, but when you put all those pieces together, you're like, you sit back and when we're on a beat, right, you're so focused on the micro. You pull back and look at the macro, and it's like, oh, it makes all the sense in the world. What was I thinking? So that's always the job on the beat, guys, right? You're always kind of like juggling things and trying to figure out, what does this mean? If this, then that, maybe. It's kind of like the finger man. It's Edward James Olmos in Stand and Deliver. You're just trying to figure out exactly what things mean. So yeah, I was surprised, but I wasn't once I pulled back and looked at the whole situation. Where was I when the trade went down? I was in Vegas. I covered the pressers that day. I walked out of the room about 4:00 or so. I said, okay, cool. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go get my hair cut. I literally was sitting in a barber chair, and she had just put the scissors to my head for the first cut, and my phone just starts going nuts. And I just look at it, and I text my editor, this is a new one. I'm sitting in a barber chair. I can't go anywhere for about 25, 30 minutes. And they're like, oh, do what you got to do. So then I got all my stuff. I ran back up to the facility. I shot a video, wrote a couple stories, couple reaction pieces, and heard from Derek Carr's camp about something that they didn't really care that I wrote. But that's what comes, right? If you're not upsetting certain people and making other people happy, you're not really doing the job.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And obviously there's been some debate, and that's the thing that I've always liked about you, is that you keep it real, Paul, when it comes to this kind of stuff. And obviously there are some that have said that Raiders gave up too much for a wide receiver, then they gave him a big time contract. It seems like the Raiders did whatever it could to reunite Carr with Adams. But how did you evaluate the trade details? And do you think that there was a winner in this trade?
It's hard for me to actually say winner. And there was a couple of years ago when at ESPN, after like drafts or after free agency, we had to either give thumbs up or thumbs down. And realistically, you're doing that. You're not doing it for clicks, but you're doing it because you have to. And because it's really I guess it's an educated guess. You can't really fairly judge draft classes until 2 or 3 years in, right? And I'm kind of the same way with acquisitions or free agent signings. I like it from this perspective because it shows that those first couple of days of free agency, they were sitting there twiddling their thumbs while the Chargers were going all in. Khalil Mack, a very familiar face to Raiders and the Raider fans. J.C. Jackson, who a lot of Raider fans would have loved to have here. Russell Wilson going to Denver. The Chiefs still being the Chiefs. And like, well, what is this new regime of the Patriots way? What are they going to do? Then all of a sudden it was boom, boom, boom. The best sack artist of the past decade is on the team all of a sudden. Now you got the best receiver. It shows me that they were going all in. And as somebody that covered this team as far back as when Randy Moss was here, this is still more exciting because Randy Moss never wanted to be a Raider. He gave up halfway through his first season there because he had to run on the dirt field in Oakland. This is the first, not only for Derek Carr, the first true number one in his prime receiver he's ever had. Because remember, the Antonio Brown thing blew this thing up and set the organization back a couple of years. This is the first true number one in his prime receiver that wants to be a Raider since Tim Brown in the mid to late 90s. That's how big this is for the Raiders. So I give it 2 thumbs up because, that's it.
It's funny, Paul, when I was in 2005 or 6, I can't remember, Kerry Collins was the quarterback, and I went to Qualcomm to watch Chargers and Raiders, and Kerry looks at Randy and he goes, "You're going to be open deep. I got you." Well, Randy kind of half-asses his route, and it's kind of jogging, and Kerry Collins overthrows him, and it gets picked off. Well, Randy comes off the field throws his helmet on the ground, says, "What are you doing? Like, you should have thrown it to me." He's like, "Dude, you didn't run." And you could tell Randy was just pissed, and he just sat on the bench, and he was just arms folded and everything. So now that you mentioned Randy, I'm like, oh my God, I remember watching him, and he threw a fit. And then you see him go to New England, he just completely kills it. And you're like, where was that gas when you were with the Raiders?
He wanted to be there, and I think he respected the thing, and a lot of it was he did ball out his first few games. I'll give him that.
He did,
and then he got hurt running a crossing pattern on the dirt infield of Oakland. I don't know if you guys remember that or not. And then he just said, "Nope, I'm done." And the thing that cracked me up about him was, I think I had half a conversation with Randy that one year in 2005. In the locker room, during the season when we still had access, you go in there and Randy was literally laying on the floor. You had to step over him to get over to the other side of the locker room. And he was just laying there taking a nap with the towel on his head. I'm like, this cat's different.
I was always wondering if like him and T.O. would call each other and be like, "Yo, dude, what are you doing this week?" "Nah, I'm gonna do this." "All right, dude, I'm gonna do that." So because every time it was either one of them were like they were doing something, some antics were happening, and I honestly felt like they were together in on it because every week it was something with those two guys.
And it was interesting because when T.O. became available later in the early 2000s, I talked to some old school Raider guys, and they were like, "Give me T.O. over Randy 20 times because T.O. at least will run hard and he'll run across the middle. And all Randy would do is just run straight down the field when he felt like it." So that's what I was told.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I mean, and that leading to this, you had mentioned it before, but I had to talk a little Randy Moss with you. But do you feel like the acquisition of Adams and Chandler Jones and some of the other pieces that they've kind of gotten, do you feel like it's enough to compete with the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Chargers? Do you feel like now this is a four horse division, I guess?
It better. I mean, they've gone all in. It would have been really easy for them to say, you know what, let's just trade Derek Carr to the Colts or the Browns. Let's just restart. I mean, we got a new regime here. Nobody's going to look at us sideways. Instead, they went all in. Knee-jerk reaction, yeah, they should be. And I wrote that this should kick them into Super Bowl contender status, not just in the division, but for the entire conference. It's a beast. Not only the division, but the entire conference. Except I say that in the middle of March, right? Because there's still so many holes. They still got to fix the offensive line because while the division has upgraded at quarterback, the pass rushing duos throughout, it's unbelievable what it is. I mean, it really is a murderer's row. So unless the Raiders can fix their offensive line, and entering today, they only had 2 linebackers on the roster. They've just signed 2 more guys today who I had to do a lot of research to figure out who they were exactly. But that's what happens in the second week of free agency. And they still need a safety. So there's a lot of holes at the Raiders. I think the Raiders may have improved themselves the most on paper, but I think they still have the most holes that they still need to address. Whereas like the Broncos probably made the biggest splash with Russell Wilson, but they're still a terrible team overall. You know what I mean? So, the Chargers, I've said this for a long time, but I've looked at the Chargers forever, and they've always, to me, beyond having the second best uniforms in the league when they wear those powder blues, they've always had, to me, the most talent. And it's just whether it's coaching or bad luck or Chargers going to Charger, it just never comes together. And then you look at the Chiefs, and it's like, well, what did they do? Oh, wow. They just added Juju Smith-Schuster. So they're ready to rock and roll. Yeah.
TikTok star Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know if you saw, Jackson Mahomes already told them, we're going to link up, bro. So, hey, they're going to create some fire content. Can that go onto the field? Who knows?
Exactly. So this division's crazy. But, I do believe they can and they better compete, but they also have some holes to fill.
Paul, are you on TikTok yet or no?
My 14-year-old daughter and my 17-year-old son come and show me things all the time. So I'll just say no.
Well, on that note, Paul, because you do a lot, we'll get you on TikTok eventually. But I want to go back to get to know you a little better, and maybe for the people watching who want to be journalists or considering being a reporter, sports reporter. Like we mentioned, you are the OG. We look up to you. For a long time, I felt like it was just you being the only Latino NFL beat reporter. Maybe there's people out there that you know of. But even today, it's not that many. But I guess what's kind of your best advice for people trying to break into the NFL or whatever it is in sports that, for you, because I think you were, like you mentioned, you started, with Barstow, LA Times, Bay Area. So you've done a little bit of everything. What is kind of the best advice you give to the kids coming up nowadays?
I think it's just be true to yourself, man. I mean, don't just do things for clicks. Don't just do things for clout. I mean, you got to be true to yourself. And at the same time, those things will come to you. it's funny. Like I look at social media, and to me, it's one of two things, and it's the same on the same coin. It's the greatest invention in human history, and it's also probably the worst because of what it brings out in people. But it's a necessary evil. You've got to establish some sort of social media imprint. But always so remember that when you're writing something, when you're tweeting something, when you're making a comment, it's forever, man. It's not just there. And I still do this, even though they're not around anymore. What would my abuelos and my abuelas think about if they read that I'm going after somebody? You got to be pro. And this was something that was taught to me by Leon Carter, Sandy Bailey, Leonard Hall with the Sports Journalism Institute way back in 1993, 94. Act pro, be treated like a pro. And that to me was always the biggest piece of advice. People are going to have preconceived notions. My first job out of college from UNLV was at Sports Illustrated. I was a fact checker in New York City. Well, guess what? I got there's preconceived notions of me already. I was the hot-blooded, fiery Latino from the West Coast, from the desert. And if I gave them even just a sample of that, well, then I was just confirming their suspicions, right? And being in New York, they didn't know what the hell I was anyway. Was I Puerto Rican? Was I Dominican? Was I Cuban? No. And the Spanish they were speaking there was way too fast for me. I'm like calling home and talking to my grandma, like, I wish I would have paid more attention when they came over and watched their stories, stuff like that. But that's my biggest advice. Just be true to yourself and be professional. And you act professional and you'll be treated professionally.
Yeah, no, and definitely social media, the two-headed monster. It could either work in your favor or it could hamper you. And that's the thing that I've always noticed is that you have to be, and especially us, we have to be very careful with anything that we post, anything that we do. So obviously you have to be a little bit more laid back, a little bit more on edge. Because I mean, yeah, people say stuff to me, people say stuff to Gilbert, but we never go at them because there's no point. Like, what's the point of going after people? It's just whatever's in a sense. Like, I just kind of ignore it because there's no point of it.
Yeah, well, then you're a bigger man than I am because there was a time when I would engage with people going back and forth, and I think I probably blocked over 1,000 people over the time that Twitter's. But a lot of that was because they would make it personal, or they'd call me name, or they'd be racist. I hold on to like the racist letters I got when I was writing columns at the Sacramento Bee. Mostly though when they went after my wife, who covers and works for the San Francisco Giants, Amy G. And they would come after me. And I'm like, dude, she can handle her own business, really. So that was what that was a lot for. But you're right. I mean, as you get a little bit older and you guys, like I said, you guys are already further ahead than I was at that stage. I was firing right back and fighting with people. Now it's like, no. And I remind myself, what would my grandparents think? And not only that, but at the age I'm at now, what would my children think? And what kind of example am I setting?
Yeah, no, exactly. I remember my grandpa, it was my uncle. He'd be like, no pongas tonterías que no quieres que la gente sepa. And I'm like, all right. Or like, don't do dumb stuff that you think people are going to see down the line or whatever. But Paul, before we let you go, I got to ask you, you've written 3 books.
Yeah.
And I got to ask you about the 3 of them. Obviously, Tommy Davis, Tales from the Dodgers Dugout, 100 Things Raiders fans should know and do before they die. And If the Walls Could Talk, Stories from the Raiders Sideline. Just what's been your favorite book that you've written, and kind of what's that been like going from obviously journalist to then writing books? Like, what has that transition been like for you?
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, it'll sound trite, but it's like asking me which of your favorite books did you write is like asking which is your favorite kid, because each one is its own different entity. The first one I did with Tommy Davis, I had no idea what I was doing, but you know what? I talked to Sandy Koufax on the phone, and he told me, I'm not talking to you about myself. I'll talk to you about Tommy all day long. Yes, sir, Mr. Koufax. Yes, sir, Mr. Koufax. And then I got to sit at Dodger Stadium and listen to Tommy and Maury Wills bicker like an old married couple at each other, cursing each other out because they couldn't remember the same story. And then, because they're brothers, they literally grew up together and they love each other. So I got to do that. Writing the Raider 100 Things book. That was fun because if I, just kind of taking the easy route, that would have been like writing 100 Wikipedia entries on different things that I chose. But I created a lot of professional friendships through that. And, Tom Flores, happy birthday, Tom Flores. Today he's 85 years old.
Happy birthday.
He and Jim Plunkett, 2 of the main trailblazers for Latinos in the NFL. Great relationships with those guys writing that book. Cliff Branch, who's passed away, but now going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. One of my biggest not only supporters, but fans, but resources whenever I was doing things like that. And then the book I just wrote with Lincoln Kennedy. Lincoln Kennedy and I graduated high school the same year. And I look at him and I thank God that Barstow High did not play his high school, Morse High School in San Diego in CIF or anything, because I'm like, I played defensive end. I was 165 back then, and he's as big as he was then. So that was rewarding as well, to work with somebody that I really respected and was with it. And I can't say exactly what it is now, but I got another one in the works too. So and it's goes back to the roots of working in LA, working at the LA Times. So it's been fun to be able to do it, and it's different. The writing for that is different. It's a lot more long form, and when you're writing in somebody else's voice, you got to be around them long enough to pick up their inflections, to pick up the things that they say, and make sure that that they're okay with it too. So it's a challenge, but it's kind of like, how many different babies do you have, or kids or whatever, and you kind of go from there. And it just reminds me of like my favorite story in my career, favorite moment. I'm working at the LA Times at the time, which is the paper I grew up reading, that and the San Bernardino Sun and the Barstow Desert Dispatch, but the LA Times was it. And I go to UNLV, my alma mater, to write a feature story on Fernando Valenzuela Jr., because he's playing first base for the Rebels. And I look up and there's Fernando sitting up in the stands. And I just walk up and I introduce myself to him. There's 2 times really where I've been intimidated because of like childhood heroes. One was Vince Ferragamo. That was my all-time favorite as a kid. And I remember introducing myself to him, going, "Oh, Mr. Ferragamo." And this is like 2 years ago. You were my favorite player when I was growing up. And he looks at me, "Oh, Paul, you're dating yourself, bro." It's like, okay, well, thank you. And then Fernando, and I walked up, and Fernando's got kind of a funny personality. He could come off to a lot of people as being kind of smug, but it's not. He's really shy, and he's funny as all get out. And I just walk up to him and we just start rapping, and we're sitting there chopping it up. And I'm thinking, holy cow, I'm sitting here with my all-time favorite baseball player, watching the game that my favorite game, baseball, at my alma mater, writing for the newspaper that I grew up loving and always wanting to work for. I don't know where we go from there. And that was in 2003. So that to me was kind of that moment. I know you didn't ask about that, but that to me was important to bring out when you ask, what's the advice? Be aware. Just be aware of all the surroundings.
Do you ever get crapped on for saying Mr.?
Mr.
I've gotten with Dean Spanos. I call him Mr. Spanos. He grabs me and literally I don't know, he just grabs me, pulls me, and he goes, "Dean, I've told you this for 10 years already." I'm like, "I'm so sorry." But he'll do mafia, pull me in, and he's like, "Dean, I've told you." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, no, and it's funny that's one of my pet peeves too. And I don't know if you guys do it or not, but it's just for me, to call coaches coach. They're not my coach. It's John Gruden, Josh McDaniels, Josh. And it's not a sign. It's not a sign of disrespect by any means. I'm just like, dude, I think it's more disrespectful if I call you coach. Like Tom Flores, he's Tom to me. The only one that I kind of bounced back and forth was Al Davis, because I did think he deserved Mr. Davis, and he insulted me and clowned me one day at a press conference, and then he winked at me later. I was like, okay, well, I'll wear that badge. It's good. Mark Davis is MD. He's just a guy, and he loves loves being that guy. So. It's strange. You want to show proper respect, obviously. But it's weird. It's weird because I'm 52. I feel like I'm in my 30s. But it's when I trip out and I step back and think, man, I've been writing articles since I was 18 in 1988.
It's not about the number, Paul. It's about how you feel.
Yeah. And that's the bottom line, right? And my wife and I, we tell each other, look, we still get to go to work. We don't have to go to work. And she's in Arizona right now for spring training, so it's all good.
Oh well.
You don't look 52, by the way, Paul.
You don't.
I try not, and I don't dye anything, man. This is all natural.
There you go.
maybe some Twitter. Some
you
good
hair. You look better than Beto Duranda, so there you go. You're already winning.
Now Beto will never have me on his podcast.
I think I woke the sleeping dragon with that one, but
man, anytime I see Carson stuff, I always text him or shoot him pictures. Eldridge Hudson, Carson legend. He played for UNLV, and when they went to the Final Four in '87, and I sent him some stuff recently, and I'm friends with Eldridge L Hud on Facebook. He's like, "Oh my God, that's awesome!" So yeah, and I covered USC hoops when the Craven twins were there way back in the day, and they were both from Carson too. And I opened up the Home Depot Center. I don't even know what it's called now, but I covered the Galaxy when they still played at the Rose Bowl, and King Taco used to be the pregame meal. So
that's the dignified
Dignity Health Sports Park.
That thing. Okay.
All I know is I was there when the Galaxy played their first game, and then what concert did I see there? And I covered Oscar De La Hoya fights there. And gosh, I can't even think of the guy. It's a band. Bruce. Guy has the fiddle, plays the violin with him.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I saw that concert there.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Honestly, Paul, thank you so much for jumping on with the Compas. We truly appreciate it. You can get all of his great work at ESPN. Obviously, all the Raider stuff, that's all Paul. So definitely a great follow. Check out his books. Paul, again, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Guys, my pleasure. And next time you take a team picture at Allegiant Stadium, I told Cassie she's in trouble. I unfollowed her on Twitter because of that stuff. Mi gente.
Definitely.
Noted.
Noted. We got it.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.